I demand to speak to your supervisor right now. Please, let's just all relax. No, I will not calm down. You have no idea who I am. I told you to stay put.
Hello, everyone, before we begin today's video.
Sir, please calm down. She just wants to get some water.
I have to get into that cockpit.
That the channel is losing traction.
You don't have
and
authorization.
subscribing
We don't have time for this,
best
Captain.
ways you
I
can
saw
help
something in the
us.
cargo bay. You have to believe me.
It's
What?
quick, free, and
Sir, please
allows
calm
us
down.
to
There's no time to be calm. We're in
continue
danger.
bringing you great content.
We need to make an unscheduled landing
Your
immediately.
support
The coordinates are on the tablet, but it's
everything.
risky.
What's happening?
Let's
Are we
keep
in
this
danger?
channel
I'm afraid we're going to have to insist you
collectively.
cooperate.
Where are you
need you
watching
to leave the
from?
flight.
Drop your
Sir,
city
with all
or
due respect,
country
please.
in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The cabin was too quiet for a flight that hadn't even closed its doors yet. First class usually hummed with soft privilege low voices, the clink of glass, the muted confidence of people who never questioned whether they belonged. But now that rhythm was gone, suspended, held. A black man stood in the aisle, tall, composed, dressed in a deep navy suit that didn't ask for attention and didn't need it. His arms were crossed, not defensive, not aggressive, controlled, as if he were holding the moment in place. Across from him, a white woman sat firmly in seat 2A. She didn't look up at first. Her posture said everything. Back straight. Chin lifted. One manicured hand rested deliberately on the armrest, fingers relaxed, claiming space that was not hers. The gesture was subtle, almost elegant, but it was possession. Between them stood a flight attendant in a lavender uniform, hands folded too tightly at her waist. Her eyes moved back and forth, caught between two versions of authority, unsure which one the system would protect. "Sir," she said carefully, forcing calm into her voice, "there seems to be a small misunderstanding." The man didn't move. He didn't reach for his boarding pass. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain himself. His eyes stayed fixed on the woman in the seat, studying her the way one studies a decision already made. The woman finally looked up. Her gaze swept over him, his face, his suit, his shoes, and something settled behind her eyes. Not confusion. Not concern. Certainty. "This seat was reassigned," she said coolly, her tone smooth, practiced. "You'll need to find another one. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be." A man seated a row behind them paused mid-sip of his drink. 2 seats across the aisle, someone stopped scrolling. The air tightened like a breath held too long. The black man tilted his head slightly. Reassigned by who he asked. The question landed softly, but it didn't disappear. The flight attendant hesitated. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She glanced at the seated woman, who leaned back, now fully settled, as if the matter had already been resolved. "Sir," the attendant tried again, "if you could just cooperate, we can avoid delaying the flight." That word cooperate hung there. The man's jaw tightened just barely. Not anger. Recognition. He'd heard that word before. Different cities. Different uniforms. Same meaning. Behind them, the cabin waited. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now back to him. The man uncrossed his arms slowly and placed his hands at his sides. The movement drew attention without demanding it. "I paid for that seat," he said evenly. The woman smiled, thin and dismissive. "And I'm sitting in it." No one raised their voice. No one called security. Not yet, Ted. But something fundamental had already shifted inside that cabin. Not because of what was said, but because of who was being believed without question and who was being asked once again to step aside. The doors to the aircraft were still open, but the flight in every way that mattered had already stopped. The pause stretched longer than it should have. In first-class time, usually moved with purpose. Drinks poured. Seats filled. Doors closed. But now everything hesitated, as if the cabin itself was waiting to see who would blink first. The woman in seat 2 crossed her legs slowly, deliberately. The soft fabric of her tailored cream suit brushed against the armrest as her hand remained exactly where it was. Still. Certain. She smiled again, this time wider. Not friendly. assured. "I'm sure this can be sorted out," she said, glancing past the black man and toward the flight attendant. "But he shouldn't be standing here." "We're holding things up?" The word he landed heavier than it should have. The flight attendant shifted her weight. She nodded once as if grateful to be given permission to act.
"Sir?" she said, lowering her voice. "If you could just step aside for a moment, I'll help you find your correct seat."
The man didn't step aside. He didn't raise an eyebrow. Didn't sigh. Didn't argue. Instead, he looked at the attendant now not with frustration, but with something more unsettling. Patience. "My correct seat," he repeated quietly. "Yes," she said quickly. Too quickly. "This area is reserved." Reserved. Behind them, the man in the third row leaned forward slightly. He'd flown enough to know how this usually went. Tickets got mixed up. Screens refreshed. Apologies followed. But this felt different. No tablet had come out. No system had been checked. Just assumptions. The black man glanced down at the armrest once. The woman noticed and tightened her fingers almost imperceptibly as if anticipating a challenge. "You don't look like someone who belongs up here," she said at last. The sentence was smooth, polished, almost polite. But the cabin heard it anyway. A soft intake of breath rippled across the aisle. Someone shifted in their seat. Another passenger looked away, suddenly very interested in the safety card. The flight attendant froze. The man's expression changed not dramatically, not visibly to most, but something behind his eyes sharpened. Focused. "Interesting," he said. "And what does someone who belongs up here look like?" The woman laughed softly, a sound meant to disarm. "Come on. Don't do this," she replied. "We both know first class isn't casual." She gestured vaguely at his suit, at his presence, at the space she occupied. The implication filled the cabin faster than sound. The flight attendant cleared her throat. "Sir," she said again, "firmer now. If you don't comply, I'll have to escalate this." "Escalate." The man nodded once, as if acknowledging a step in a process he'd already mapped out. "By all means," he said. The attendant hesitated. Her training told her to de-escalate. Her instincts told her this wasn't about seats anymore. Still, she turned, slightly angling her body toward the galley. The woman in two relaxed back into her seat, victorious already. She picked up the glass of water beside her and took a slow sip, eyes never leaving the man standing in the aisle. He didn't move. He didn't sit. He didn't leave. And in that moment, before any announcements, before any raised voices, before anyone thought to check a system, the power dynamic in that cabin quietly exposed itself. Not in who was seated, but in who was expected to step aside without question. The aisle felt narrower now, not because anyone had moved, but because the space for pretending had disappeared. The black man stood exactly where he was, shoulder-squared posture, relaxed but immovable. The kind of stillness that wasn't passive, the kind that forced everyone else to adjust around it. The flight attendant took one step toward the galley, then stopped. "I just need to confirm a few things," she said, half to him, half to herself. "It won't take long." He nodded once. "Take all the time you need." His voice carried no challenge, no edge. And somehow that made it harder to ignore. She glanced down at the tablet in her hand, then back up at him. For a brief moment, she looked as if she might actually ask for his boarding pass. The sensible thing, the procedural thing, but she didn't. Instead, she turned again toward seat 2A. "Ma'am," she said gently, "can you confirm your seat assignment?" The woman didn't hesitate. "It's mine," she replied. "They moved me up when I boarded." "They?" the man asked calmly. The woman waved a dismissive hand. "Someone at the gate." "I don't remember names." The answer was too easy, too clean. Behind them, the man in the third row frowned. Gate upgrades weren't impossible, but they were logged. Announced. accompanied by apologies and smiles. This had been none of that. The black man tilted his head slightly, considering. So, he said, no one told me. The woman shrugged. Maybe you weren't supposed to be told. The flight attendant stiffened at that. Ma'am, it's fine, the man interrupted softly. Both women turned to him. I don't need an explanation, he continued. I just need accuracy. Accuracy. The word landed with weight. The attendant swallowed. Sir, I'm trying to resolve this as quickly as possible. I'm sure you are. He glanced down the aisle briefly. Passengers had gone quiet now. No one was pretending not to watch anymore. Phones stayed down, but eyes were fixed. Everyone sensed it. This wasn't entertainment. This was something else. The woman in two leaned forward slightly, her patience thinning. Why are we still talking about this? She said. He doesn't belong here. It's obvious. There it was. Not shouted. Not dramatic. Just spoken like a fact everyone should accept. The cabin seemed to recoil subtly. Even the attendant flinched this time. The man exhaled slowly through his nose, not in frustration but in recognition, as if a final variable had just been confirmed. Obvious to who he asked. The woman rolled her eyes. To anyone with eyes. Silence followed. Heavy, undeniable. The attendant straightened her back. Her training told her to defuse tension. Her instincts told her the tension wasn't coming from him. Sir, she said more formally now, if you refuse to step aside, I'll need to involve the purser. The man nodded again. Please do. No protest. No panic. No attempt to prove himself. Just consent. The woman in two leaned back once more, confident. Victorious. She had seen this end before. Men like him always moved eventually. What she didn't notice, what no one in that cabin noticed yet, was the quiet shift taking place behind the scenes. Not on the aisle. Not in the seats. But in the chain of decisions that had just been set in motion. And unlike everyone else in first class, the man standing there already knew exactly where this was going. The purser arrived with the kind of calm that came from authority backed by routine. Middle-aged, crisp uniform. A smile practiced enough to pass as reassurance. He took in the scene quickly, the standing man, the seated woman, the stalled aisle, and nodded as if he already understood how this would end. What seems to be the issue? He asked. The flight attendant answered immediately, relief in her voice. There's been a seating conflict. The passenger is refusing to move. Refusing. The word landed carefully chosen, cleanly framed. The purser turned to the man. Sir, he said, tone even but firm, this area is reserved. If there's been a mistake, we can correct it once you step aside. The man met his gaze without hesitation. I'm standing in front of my seat, he replied. That's not a mistake. The purser's smile tightened. According to our records, this seat is occupied. The woman in 2A didn't look up. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was already being treated as proof. By whom the man asked. The purser hesitated just a fraction of a second too long.
Sir, he said instead, we don't want to delay the flight.
Delay again. Always the delay. As if the problem were time, not judgment. The man glanced down the aisle once more. Passengers were fully attentive now. No one spoke. No one intervened. The silence wasn't neutral, it was heavy with expectation. He turned back to the purser. Have you checked the system? He asked. The purser's jaw tightened. I don't need to, he replied. This situation is clear. Clear. The woman in two shifted, emboldened. I really don't understand why this is still happening, she said, sighing dramatically. Some people just don't know when to accept they're in the wrong place. The purser nodded as if she'd spoken a truth that didn't need questioning. The man felt it then, not anger, not shock, but something colder. Familiar. This wasn't confusion. It was procedure shaped by assumption. The purser took a small step closer, lowering his voice. Sir, if you continue to resist crew instructions, we may need to involve security. Security. The escalation everyone pretended was neutral. The man looked down at the purser's hand as it hovered near his elbow, not touching but close enough to suggest what came next. Let me be very clear, the man said quietly. I am not resisting anything. The purser raised an eyebrow. Then cooperate. That word, again. The cabin seemed to contract around it. The man straightened slightly, just enough to reclaim space without advancing. His voice remained steady, controlled. You're asking me to move, he said without verifying a single fact. The purser's patience thinned. Sir, I'm following policy. No, the man replied. You're hiding behind it. The statement was calm. Surgical. The purser stiffened. That's enough. The woman in two smiled into her glass. The man didn't respond. He simply reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, not for a ticket, not for proof. For his phone. The purser's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? The man glanced at him briefly. Making sure this stays accurate. He typed one short message. No names. No explanations. Just instructions. Around them, the cabin waited, still believing this was a routine correction, a minor inconvenience, something that would resolve the way it always did. What they didn't realize was that the system they trusted had just been challenged by someone who understood it far better than they ever would. And for the first time since boarding began, the delay was no longer accidental. It was intentional. The man in row 3 had stopped pretending not to watch. He'd flown this route dozens of times, early mornings, late nights, enough upgrades to know the rhythm of first class by heart. He knew how these situations usually resolved. A quick scan. A quiet apology. Maybe a drink voucher. This wasn't that. From his angle, he'd seen the boarding pass scanner flash green earlier. He'd seen the black man step into the aisle with purpose, not confusion. And he'd seen the woman slide into seat 2A without so much as a glance backward, as if the space had always been hers. Now the purser stood squared in front of the man, posture firm, voice clipped. Authority had arrived, and with it a decision already made. The witness shifted forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees.
His brow furrowed.
Something didn't add up. The black man hadn't raised his voice, hadn't argued, hadn't demanded anything extraordinary, and yet every instruction pointed in one direction: move him. The woman in 2A took another sip of water, slower this time. She could feel the attention now. She liked it. Power always felt better when it was visible. Is there a problem back there? She asked lightly, turning her head just enough to address the purser. Because I really don't appreciate being made uncomfortable. The word uncomfortable echoed through the cabin. The purser responded immediately. We're handling it, ma'am. Handling him, the witness noted. The black man remained still, phone now, back in his jacket. His eyes had shifted not toward the woman, not toward the crew, but down the aisle, briefly locking with the witnesses. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even a request. It was acknowledgement. The witness felt something tighten in his chest. Behind the purser, the flight attendant hovered, hands clasped, her earlier confidence replaced by unease. She'd noticed it too, the absence of proof, the absence of verification. But systems didn't reward doubt. They rewarded compliance. Sir, the purser said again, this is your final request. Final. The witness inhaled sharply through his nose. That word bothered him. It came too soon. Too fast. Final usually came after facts. The black man nodded once, almost imperceptibly. I understand, he said. The woman smiled, satisfied. The witness couldn't sit still anymore. He leaned slightly into the aisle, careful not to draw attention, his voice low but clear. Excuse me, he said. The purser turned, irritation flashing briefly across his face. Sir, please remain seated. I saw his ticket, scan, the witness replied. It was green. The cabin froze. The woman's smile faltered just a fraction. The flight attendant's head snapped up. The purser stared at the witness weighing the disruption.
Sir, this doesn't concern you.
It does if you're about to remove the wrong person, the witness said calmly.
Silence pressed in from every side.
The black man didn't react. Didn't nod.
Didn't thank him.
He simply stood, letting the words exist on their own. The woman shifted in her seat, now posture stiffening. Are you saying I don't belong here? She snapped. The witness met her gaze. I'm saying someone should check before deciding who doesn't. The purser's jaw clenched. For the first time since the conflict began, doubt crept into the system, small, unwelcome, but undeniable. And once doubt entered the cabin, it didn't sit quietly. It spread. The doubt didn't calm the cabin. It sharpened it. The purser straightened his authority suddenly under inspection. He glanced from the witness back to the black man, then toward the woman in seat 2, a still seated, still certain, but no longer untouchable. We're not doing this here, the purser said, voice tightening. Sir, he added, turning back to the black man, step aside now. The black man didn't answer. He didn't need to. The purser took a step closer. Not aggressive. Not yet. Just close enough to reassert control. The flight attendant moved with him, instinctively forming a barrier. And then it happened. A hand reached out. Light pressure. 2 fingers on the black man's forearm. Not a grab. Not a shove. A guide. The kind of touch meant to look helpful while making resistance seem unreasonable. The cabin reacted before sound did. A collective intake of breath. A ripple of movement.
Someone whispered, "Oh no."
The black man looked down at the hand.
Slowly.
Deliberately. For a split second, the present fractured and memory rushed in. A different airport. Years ago. A security line that moved too slowly when it was his turn. A hand on his shoulder steering him aside while others passed freely. A voice saying, "Sir, just cooperate." The same word. The same tone. The same assumption. He lifted his gaze back to the purser. "Remove your hand," he said. Not loud. Not threatening. Final. The flight attendant froze, fingers still resting where they shouldn't be. The purser hesitated. Authority and uncertainty collided in his eyes. "Sir," he warned, "don't make this worse." Worse. As if it wasn't already clear what had just happened. The witness in row 3 stood halfway from his seat.
She touched him, he said.
That's not protocol. The woman in 2 scoffed, but her voice wavered. Oh, please. He's being dramatic. The black man didn't look at her. He didn't look at the witness. His focus stayed on the hand. The flight attendant withdrew it quickly as if burned. The cabin went silent, not the passive quiet from before. This was different. Charged. The kind of silence that follows a line crossed in public when everyone knows there's no pretending anymore. The purser cleared his throat. "We need to resolve this immediately." "Yes," the black man replied. "You do." He reached into his jacket again. This time, there was no hesitation. He pulled out his phone, unlocked it, and typed with precision. One message. Sent. The purser's radio crackled at his hip. He stiffened. The woman in 2 leaned forward now, uncertainty creeping into her posture. "What are you doing?" she asked. The black man slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Making sure no one else crosses another line," he said calmly. The cabin waited. Whatever this had been before, an inconvenience, a misunderstanding, a routine correction, was gone. Something irreversible had replaced it. And everyone in first class could feel it. They just didn't know yet who it was about to fall on. The cabin didn't recover from the touch. It sat in the aftermath of its stiff alert, aware that something fundamental had shifted. The kind of moment people remembered later and said, that's when everything changed. The purser pressed his lips together, forcing calm back into his posture. His authority had been challenged not loudly, not theatrically, but in a way that left no room for denial. "Sir," he said, "more carefully now we're going to step back and reset this situation." Reset. As if it were a screen frozen mid-error. The black man nodded once. "That would be wise." The woman in seat 2 shifted again, this time sitting straighter. Her confidence hadn't vanished, but it had tightened like fabric pulled too far. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice sharper now. "You touched him for 2 seconds." "He's not a child." The witness turned toward her. "You don't get to decide that," he said quietly. She scoffed, but didn't reply. The flight attendant stood, rigid hands clasped behind her back. Her face had gone pale. Training told her to defer to the purser. Instinct told her she'd already crossed something she couldn't step back over. The black man didn't say a word. That was the most unsettling part. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't trying to win the room. He was waiting. The purser glanced down at his radio again. Another faint crackle. Another pause. "Captain has been notified," he said. "We're just waiting on confirmation." Of what the man asked. The purser hesitated. Of how to proceed. The man's gaze held steady. "Then let me help you." The purser looked up, wary. "You're about to make a choice," the man continued, voice level. "You can slow this down and verify what you should have checked already." He let the sentence breathe. "Or you can escalate again," he added, "and explain later why you didn't." The cabin leaned into the silence. The woman laughed, once short, brittle. "Is that a threat?" The man finally looked at her. Not with anger. With clarity. "No," he said. "It's a warning." The word settled into the cabin with weight. A warning didn't beg. It didn't posture. It didn't need witnesses. It existed to be ignored once. The purser swallowed. His eyes flicked toward the cockpit door, then back to the man standing in the aisle. "I need you to remain calm," he said. "I am calm," the man replied. "You should be concerned." Another crackle from the radio. Longer this time. The purser straightened, hand lifting instinctively toward the receiver, then stopping himself. He seemed suddenly aware of how every movement would be interpreted. Around them, first class waited. No one spoke. No one moved. The flight was still grounded on paper, but the warning had already landed. And for the first time since boarding began, the people who thought they were in control realized they might have already missed their chance to turn back. The cockpit door stayed closed. No announcement followed. No apology. No explanation. Just a pause long enough to make the cabin uneasy. The purser lowered his voice, turning slightly away from the passengers as if discretion could still restore control. "Captain is reviewing the situation," he said. "We'll have clarity shortly." Clarity. The black man nodded, accepting the word without trusting it. He shifted his weight, not to leave, not to advance, but to stand more comfortably in the aisle, as if he'd settled in for something longer than a delay. His calm didn't read as patience anymore. It read as certainty. The woman in seat 2 unnoticed. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the armrest again. The earlier ease in her posture had thinned into vigilance. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" she said, attempting a smile that didn't quite land. "All this drama over a seat." The man didn't answer her. Instead, he glanced down at his watch. A subtle movement. Almost dismissible. Almost. The witness in row 3 caught it and felt a chill. That wasn't impatience. That was timing. The flight attendant stepped closer to the purser, whispering urgently. "Should we check the manifest again?" The purser hesitated. Pride warred with prudence. Before he could answer, the purser's radio crackled louder this time. He turned slightly, shielding the device with his hand. "Yes," he said into it. "Understood." His posture changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. He looked back at the black man studying him now, not as a problem to be removed, but as a variable he might have misjudged. "We're pausing boarding," the purser announced to the cabin, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Please remain seated." A ripple moved through first class. Pausing boarding meant delays. Delays meant consequences. Consequences meant someone above them had decided this wasn't small anymore. The woman in 2A straightened sharply. "Why would you pause boarding?" she demanded. "This is absurd." The purser didn't answer her. The black man finally spoke again. "Thank you," he said quietly. The purser blinked. "For what? For slowing down," the man replied. "It's the first correct step you've taken." The words weren't cruel. They were factual. The woman laughed again, too loudly. "You're acting like you run the place." The man met her eyes. "I do," he said. "Just not in the way you're imagining." The cabin stilled. Before she could respond, a chime sounded soft, controlled. Not the kind meant for passengers. The purser looked toward the cockpit door, then back at the man. "I've been instructed to wait," he said carefully. "Good," the man replied. He reached into his jacket once more, not hurried, not dramatic, and took out his phone. This time, he didn't type. He pressed a single button. And somewhere far from the cabin, far from uniforms and assumptions and borrowed authority, a system responded. No one in first class heard the words exchanged on that call, but they felt the effect immediately. Because from that moment on, flight was no longer delayed by confusion. It was being held deliberately, precisely by someone who knew exactly how much power silence could carry. The pause stretched past discomfort and into something heavier. Boarding should have resumed by now. A voice should have come over the intercom. An apology. A reassurance. Something to tell the cabin that this was still routine. Nothing came. The aisle lights remained steady. The cockpit door stayed closed. And first class sat suspended in a silence that no longer felt temporary. The purser checked his watch, then his radio. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tension in his shoulders said enough. The black man remained standing calm as before, but now his stillness felt different. It wasn't restraint. It was control. The woman in seat 2 shifted again, irritation breaking through her composure. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "People have connections. Flights get delayed. That doesn't make him special." No one responded. Not the purser. Not the flight attendant. Not the passengers who had begun to realize something was unfolding far beyond a seating dispute. The witness in row 3 leaned back slowly, eyes fixed on the man in the aisle. He'd seen enough boardrooms, enough corporate standoffs to recognize the signs.
This wasn't bluffing.
This was leverage activating. A soft chime sounded from the cockpit. The purser straightened instantly. Then another sound followed, different. Subtle. The unmistakable click of a system locking into a holding pattern. The flight attendant glanced toward the galley monitor. Her face drained of color. "Boarding status just changed," she whispered. The purser frowned. Changed how she swallowed. "It's frozen." The word carried weight. The woman laughed sharply. "Frozen... what does that even mean?" The purser didn't answer her. He turned toward the cockpit door, then back to the man standing in the aisle. For the first time since this began, uncertainty edged into his voice. "Sir," he said carefully, "are you responsible for this?" The man met his gaze. "I told you I didn't want to delay the flight," he said. "You did that yourselves." The cabin seemed to tilt. The witness felt it in his chest, that subtle shift when power changes hands without announcement. The woman's confidence cracked. "You can't just stop a flight," she said. "That's not how this works." The man nodded slightly. "That's exactly how it works." The cockpit door finally opened. The captain stepped out, face serious eyes, scanning the cabin before landing on the purser and then on the man in the aisle. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered. The captain's posture changed. "We're holding," the captain said quietly to the purser. "Indefinitely." The word hit harder than any accusation. Indefinitely meant someone above them had intervened. Someone with authority the crew couldn't override. The woman in seat 2 stood abruptly. "This is insane," she protested. "You're grounding a plane over a misunderstanding," the captain looked at her once, then back at the man. "No," he said. "We're grounding it to prevent a larger one." The black man finally stepped forward, not toward his seat, not toward the woman, but just enough to reclaim the aisle. "I warned you," he said calmly. "I don't raise my voice." He let the silence settle. "I freeze systems." The flight was still on the ground. But in that moment, everyone in first class understood the truth. This plane wasn't waiting to take off anymore. It was waiting for accountability to land. The cabin held its breath. The captain stood in the aisle, now posture straight, expression unreadable. He didn't address the woman in seat 2A. He didn't address the passengers. His attention stayed fixed on the man who still hadn't taken his seat. "Sir," the captain said, lowering his voice, "may I see your boarding pass? The request landed differently this time." Not as a test. Not as a challenge, but as a correction that had come far too late. The black man reached into his jacket and removed the boarding pass slowly, deliberately. He didn't hand it to the flight attendant. He didn't pass it to the purser. He gave it directly to the captain. The captain glanced down, then froze. Not theatrically, not visibly to most, but his jaw tightened and his eyes flicked once more to the name printed there, then to the small notation beneath it. Ownership. Voting rights. Override authority. The captain looked up again, and this time his tone changed. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," he said quietly. The name rippled through the cabin like a dropped glass. The woman in seat 2 stiffened. "Who?" she asked sharply. The captain didn't answer her. Instead, he handed the boarding pass back with both hands. Respectful. Intentional. "I apologize for the delay," the captain said. "This matter is being handled." Handled. The purser swallowed hard. The flight attendant's eyes widened. The witness in row 3 leaned back, a slow realization settling in. The man, Mr. Carter, finally turned toward seat 2A. "You didn't take my seat," he said calmly. The woman opened her mouth, ready to argue. "You took my time," he continued, "and you exposed a system that assumed it could decide who belongs without checking." Her confidence evaporated. I was told," she started. "You weren't told," he replied. "You were enabled." The cabin was silent. "Mr. Carter stepped forward now, just enough to stand beside the seat that had been his all along. "For the record," he said, voice even I'm not here as a passenger." He met the captain's eyes once more. "I'm here as an owner." The word landed clean and final. The purser's face drained of color. The flight attendant looked down, shame and fear mixing in her expression. The woman stood abruptly. "This is absurd," she said. "You can't do this." Mr. Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile. "I already did," he said. The captain nodded slightly. "We'll be addressing this immediately." As Mr. Carter finally turned and sat in seat 2, his seat, the cabin felt the shift completely. This wasn't a reveal meant to embarrass. It was a correction meant to reset the rules. And everyone in first class understood the same thing at once. They hadn't just witnessed a man reclaim a seat. They'd witnessed power reclaim the room. The reaction wasn't loud. It was worse than that. It was quiet. The woman stood frozen beside seat 2. Her mouth slightly open, words caught somewhere between denial and panic. The certainty she'd carried just minutes ago had drained from her posture, leaving something brittle behind. "I didn't know," she said quickly, too quickly. "No one told me." I thought you didn't have to ask, Mr. Carter replied evenly. The purser stepped back instinctively, creating distance as if proximity itself had become dangerous. His authority had collapsed without a single order being shouted. The flight attendant stared at the floor. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. She knew exactly which moment she'd lose sleep over later. The captain spoke again, voice controlled but firm. "Ma'am, I'll need you to gather your belongings." What the woman snapped? "You can't be serious." The captain didn't blink. "You'll be reseated." Her face flushed. In economy, the word slipped out like an insult. The witness in row 3 exhaled slowly. No one else reacted. The silence had chosen its side. Mr. Carter didn't watch her leave. He watched the crew. This didn't happen because of one person, he said calmly. It happened because no one thought the system needed checking. The purser nodded once. It was the only response he had left. The woman gathered her bag in sharp, embarrassed movements and stepped into the aisle. As she passed Mr. Carter, she avoided his eyes. He didn't move. Didn't gloat. Didn't need to. When she disappeared toward the back of the cabin, first class remained still, chastened, reset, aware that something irreversible had just occurred. The captain turned to Mr. Carter. "We're ready when you are." Mr. Carter leaned back into his seat at last, adjusting his jacket with unhurried precision. "Good," he said. "Let's finish what we started." The flight hadn't taken off yet, but the collapse was complete. The cabin settled into a new stillness. Not tension this time. Alignment meant.
Seatbelts clicked.
Trays were cleared. The soft choreography of departure resumed, but with a different awareness, as if everyone on board now understood the cost of getting it wrong. The captain's voice finally came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We're preparing for departure. No explanation. No excuses." Mr. Carter sat quietly in seat 2, hands folded, gaze forward. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another passenger, now composed, unremarkable, done speaking. But the system around him had changed. The purser stood straighter. The flight attendant moved with care. Every instruction was checked, verified, precise. As the plane began to push back from the gate, the witness in row 3 caught Mr. Carter's eye one last time and nodded. "Not in gratitude. In recognition." Mr. Carter returned at once. When the engines powered up, he spoke softly, more to the space than to anyone in particular. "I didn't raise my voice," he said. "I raised the standard." The aircraft rolled forward, and with it, an old assumption stayed behind on the runway, grounded, exposed, and no longer welcome aboard.